Did I know your name was Joanna Johnson?
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Feel a
I
little
now know your name for the first time.
until right now. That's so funny because I forget what people know me as, right? So when they meet me in public, they always say unlearn, and I'm like, well, Joanna, how you doing? But it's at least it's a
Well,
nice turn.
either way, it's a pleasure to make both your acquaintances.
Oh, thank you.
I was especially struck by the fact that you're doing this Holocaust education thing.
Well, for a long time, I mean, my school, I think when I started teaching, and we can talk about this in the thing, when I started teaching as well, like I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto. I don't remember any diversity. There was diversity, religious, racial, everything. But when you're white and upper middle, like middle class, whatever, it's like you can wear blinders, right?
Right.
You just don't see. And so I've been teaching this same school for 20 years, and for the first 10 years of that school, I would say 75% of the school was Jewish.
Right.
And so not only did I get to know them, but the really amazing part for me, because those are kids, and even if they happen to be Jewish, not necessarily everybody's connected to their faith in any way.
Right.
And I had some great stories with that community and understanding, but because of them, they had grandparents and great, like I got to meet Holocaust survivors and make connections and go to these different things that the average person just wouldn't. Not, just
And the
circumstance,
average teacher, actually.
right? Just wouldn't. And I think I mean, it's not like I've met so many, but for every survivor that I've ever met, what I've always been blown away by, like quite floored by, is their love and compassion and their stress and their focus on never again. And not never again for the Jewish community, although that's included. Never again. Like the amount of people that I've sat with and they'll talk about Somalia, or they'll talk about, different parts of Somalia, different parts of the world and what's going on. They'll say, when we said never again, we meant never again for any community. And
Right.
look, it's happening there and it's happening
Mhm.
there. And when it's just like, for me, I go into like, I think I used to get, and I still do, I guess. I get very defensive. I get very angry. I get very irate.
Right.
And then you talk to somebody who's been through it and they've let go of it somehow. The anger and the rage of it all. And I ask them how, and the answer is always the same. They'll say, Joanna, look at my kids. Look at my grandkids. Look at what I have, right?
Right.
Why
That's
would I waste time being angry about that? I don't want it to happen again, but I can't live there.
right.
Living there means that I didn't survive. And I'm just like, every time I talk to somebody, it's just like, it
I
blows me away.
mean, yeah, it's intense. I mean, my mom survived Dachau,
It's insane.
and my dad survived having been sent to the gulags.
Right.
And then after that, he ended up joining the underground. So he was like the kind of hero, the unsung hero of World War II
Right.
that smuggled the Jews after the war. They were
Yeah.
in these DP camps for like 3 years, healing and getting better and being nourished
Yeah.
back to life. And he smuggled them through the Austrian and Italian Alps to boats that took them to Palestine. It's a
Wow.
whole other saga. That's
Right.
another story that I have to figure out how to tell.
And nobody
But
tells that. Nobody
huh?
tells that. You don't,
Nobody
it,
knows it.
nobody tells that story. Nobody knows that story. It's just like, and I think from my side, as the work that I do and the things that I focus on, what I'm really focused on is bystanders,
Right.
and is what happened here in Canada. I live in, obviously, in Canada. What happened in Canada, and the way in which this gets taught to our children, as though the US and Canada came in and saved everybody. And I get very, I'm just like, yeah, but fine, we won, and yes, camps were liberated. It's fine. But that was like a consequence, like an outcome, a side effect. It was never the focus. It was never the draw. We knew that that was happening. We have this tiny little paper in Montreal called the Montreal Gazette that was reporting on concentration camps and, you know, taking away passports and taking away identifications way before 1939.
Yeah.
Right? For 6 years. And our government's going to sit there and say, we didn't know? Stop.
No, our government, you know, look, America is founded on shit. You know,
Well, it's like I feel like we need to all own our garbage, right? I think that's super important to say the truth. And what's going on in the United States right now and Canada, by the way, because it just seeps
it's
across the
spilling
border
in.
like
Yeah, I see
pollution.
that. I see that.
The problem is that we are at this place where it's like everybody doesn't want to talk about it anymore because, well, we're a better country now. We're better this now. We don't do that anymore. We're not this, we're not that. Or they deny it outright. And so it's just, that's my goal of teaching history or teaching politics or teaching kids in general is to teach, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
And to say, listen, because, and if we don't do it that way, you hear these murmurs coming out of, and I don't, whether it's Kanye or not, but like, he just has this huge platform and he's just a microphone for a sentiment that is very important to talk about. Because if we don't, welcome to 1933.
Yeah.
We just go right back, right? We go right back where we're like, that undercurrent and those undertones and all of that gets to drive a lot of very scary freaking narrative.
Yeah. And it's also the more of a minority that are those people. They just have a, you know, just they spread fear, so it gets more, it's
absolutely they do. Yeah.
I also think that's interesting that I think why you might have connected to the stories of especially the Holocaust survivors is because I know for myself, having been gay and Jewish, there's like that thing that you have to survive if you're somebody coming out back in the 70s, you know, it was like not as welcome as it
was elite.
as it was up until about 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So I feel like, and I've pushed away the fact that I came from Holocaust parents was like, I was like, la, 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 you know, I couldn't deal. And it wasn't until around 2017 when that piece of music was found again.
Yeah.
And the Nazis were marching in Charlottesville, and that whole summer was all about the rude awakening that America is not the paradise, you know, it's paradise lost, you know what I mean? And it was a time for me to reconnect with my heritage. And then I've been on this journey through COVID, which unfortunately we shut down the film because of everything else.
Right.
But I mean, good things come out of the worst situations in terms of I found my platform. I kept my uncle's message of won't be silent alive through COVID, through TikTok, believe it or not. And it's become me reconnected to my activist past, which I kind of hung up my activist shoes from the women's movement and the gay rights movement in the 70s and 80s, because everything was like, oh, everything's fine.
We're all good.
And it isn't.
Yeah, no, it isn't. And it's interesting.
Tell me about the project. Talk about the project on TikTok a little bit.
Absolutely. So what happened was, so I teach a world religions class and I'm a big fan of art in any capacity. And I had the right group. I always have to have the right group of kids. Some kids don't, you know, they can get very nervous for it, or they can get very insecure about it. So it's not the same kind of outlet for them as it was for this particular group.
What's the age group?
Sorry, grade 11. So they're what, 16? Yeah.
That's a good
So yeah, I cover 12 major world religions. And as we're talking about the ISP, or this sort of final summative, I said, guys, like, I knew they were a very artistic group of kids. And I said, we'd been talking quite a bit, obviously, timely wise, about Kanye's statements, about different groups, whether it be Charlottetown or whether it be different groups right now, sort of echoing this insanity and
Yeah, white lives matter out of the same mouth, right? So now you've got two groups for the price of one shirt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got both. And it just became like, you know, the kids are on Twitter or they're on TikTok and they're just seeing all of this stuff, and people sort of the rising old anti-Semitic tropes that we've already discussed. So we kind of discussed them earlier in the year before this really sort of blew up, you know, significantly publicly on social media. It's been there for a very long time. So when I teach Judaism, we definitely talk about the faith, we talk about the beliefs, we talk about the practices and rituals, and then we talk about the cultural reality. So of course I talk about we talk about the Holocaust and the creation of Israel, but more than that, the kids always say, because I come to it later, because I just like the way their minds work. We get to this hatred and this they've been taught about the Holocaust for years, right? In Canada. And they say, we don't get it. Why that group? Why were they hated so much? You know, and that's a lot of things people don't speak about. They don't speak about years prior to what Christians were and weren't allowed to do, and specifically borrowing and lending money, right? So all of a sudden Christians couldn't do that because that wasn't Christian-like. So you had parts of the Jewish community fill that business role, right? And then all of a sudden people started blaming that community for owing money to, right? So there was this underlying anger of and that sentiment. Or I talked about doctors and how old Christian physicians weren't allowed to touch their patients, so nobody wanted to go to a Christian doctor.
I mean, that I didn't even know. I'm going to take.
What the hell are you doing, right? So of course
I would do anything to have a teacher like you. Are you growing up?
That's amazing. Like it's my biggest compliment when somebody says, I wish I would have had you as a teacher, or even better, I wish my kids could come and be taught by you. So we talk about that. And then we also talk about the forced migration and the lack of a homeland, and what being the outsider, what position that put them in, and what kind of hate and animosity you could have felt to any outsider. They just happened to be the perpetual outsider. So when something went bad in your community, that's who you blamed, you know? And then my kids are like, oh my God, it's just like the States talking about immigrants. I said, yes, it is very easy and very, let's say, comfortable in a very disgusting way to blame people you don't know, that aren't your tribe, if you will, that aren't your people, that don't look like you, that don't sound like you, that don't believe in the same things you believe in. It's very easy to say it's them. It's not so easy to say, well, what did I do in this situation? Or what did my government do? Or what did, you know, like it's, you know, or what does the world look like? And you see it. And this is why I think the rise of anti-Semitism right now, because in times of crisis, whether it's economic, whether it's cultural, whether it's environmental, we are very quick to want to ignore and then to blame. Because if we can do those things, I don't have to carry it, whoever, you know, the individual. And I think when you have governments or organizations that are so quick to shift that, to make sure that their base and their community feels empowered. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of them. Whoever they are. Right. And your life is going to get better. Right. That's how Hitler got to power. And that's why when people made the comparisons between Trump and Hitler, they were valid comparisons. Trump just wasn't pointing to the Jewish community. He was pointing to what? The southern border. He was pointing to the Chinese. He was pointing to them.
Yeah,
they're the problem.
Yeah.
That you don't have a job anymore at your you know, Ford plant. They're the reason why, you know, we're being inundated and we can't support all of these people in the United States. It's them. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of them.
I mean, the whole idea of other, I'm just so used to it
Mhm.
that, of course, when you see it being acted out now in the immediate situation that we're all in politically, it becomes so much more frustrating, which is why ultimately the project that I want to do or I am doing and will finish, if it's the last thing I do, is about bringing the people together through music. It's not only about my family's heritage, it's about we are all immigrants at the end of the day. And because I made this journey to give my uncle, rather than just be one of the anonymous 6 million Jews, to give him a name, a face, and a legacy, I think it's upon everyone to kind of go back to your family history and find something outside of just, 23andMe, finding out all these relatives that you don't want to go have dinner with, you know what I mean? But to find a kernel of your heritage and make it matter, I think that that's it. It's on all of us to embrace who we are, but not only the me, but it's like where they come from, especially if you have like an immigrant background, for sure. I think
Well, and don't
that's
we all?
hopefully the platform that it'll ultimately spin, because I like the idea of the live experience and bringing music together and stuff,
And I think, and that's why I guess I do the art, because the conversations that we got to have about that piece were so organic and are authentic. I wasn't sitting at the front of the room preaching. I wasn't talking. I wasn't, they weren't taking notes and studying for a test. We were deciding. So just to talk about the piece for a second, like the hull of the ship were all journals written by actual Holocaust, survivors that then had their journal. Now, none of them were in English, obviously. So what did we have to do? Well, we found them, we found out who wrote them, and we tried to find translations of them. And we would read pieces of the English translation while, we were doing the art at the hull of the ship. Or another student would be collecting all the Holocaust memorial pictures from all across the world. And she'd be like, check this one out. Look at how beautiful look at how powerful this one is. And we'd talk about it. And while we're doing all this, I have kids coming in my classroom all the time looking at it, and teachers. And I had a young grade 7 student who came in and said, Joe, did you know that my grandmother was on that boat? And I'm like, what? Wow. She goes, she was 4 years old. And she was on that boat, and then proceeded to tell me, how they got turned away, where she ended up, and how she eventually ended up in Canada. And I said, could we include her? So a part of the thing is actually her identification in one of the things, and then her adult signature, because obviously she grew up and had a beautiful family. She has since passed, but her adult signature is on the front of that boat. And to sit there and look at this kid who is one of just a lovely, tiny little human being, and to know that if England, which is where they ended up first, if England hadn't taken 200 of those people, and they all sort of took, that she wouldn't be standing there right now.
Right.
That's all it would have taken, right? Because there was a lot of people on that boat that got turned around and didn't make it.
What was the name of that boat again?
USS St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a film about that was nominated for an Oscar?
I haven't seen it. Somebody was talking about that in one of my live streams. So for me, it was always, when I think about that boat, the reason why I always go back to it is because that was our job and we didn't do it.
Right. Voyage of
our
the
job, 900 people on that boat. That's it.
Yeah.
900. How dare we? And then I think about my prime minister at the time, Mackenzie King, a horrible excuse for your human being, saying no Jew was too many. Those are his famous.
There's the movie that your project is on is called Voyage of the Damned. It was with Faye Dunaway, Max von Sydow, Oscar Werner, Malcolm McDowell, Orson Welles, James Mason, Lee Grant, Catherine Ross, Michael Constantine, Jose Ferrer, and Wendy Hiller. You may want to.
I'm going to get that. You know what? I'm going to get that. And I'm going to do a day maybe, Holocaust Memorial Day, and we're gonna do something at the school. I'm gonna play that. I guarantee no one's seen that film. I'm gonna find a copy of it, and I'll talk about the piece, and then we'll play the film for the students, because my kids have seen like Schindler's List, maybe The Kite Runner, which, don't get me wrong, incredible movies.
Right.
But what that movie is about the fact that we didn't do anything. That when the United States was pulled into a war for one reason, we were pulled into the war for another reason, neither of which were to save
anyone,
the Jewish people, the Romani, the gay population,
no,
none of that was our goal. Let's be honest. And proof of that was we just kept turning boats away, and establishing, we also, even the kids, we talk about establishing the state of Israel. And the kids are very skeptical, and I find this interesting, of teenagers, why they would create a state of Israel after that. Did we really think they stopped being anti-Semitic?
Right.
Or was there another purpose in that? And then you see Israel surrounded by its 6 countries that would rather them not be there anymore, and have proved that time and time again. And we arm them and we fund them to do what? To represent a political stake for the Western world in a region they have none.
Right.
And then I think about that, because my kids often want to talk about Israel and Palestine and how did that start and why does that exist? And I'm like, guys, we're talking thick books of information here. I said, if you can understand it, I would love it. But we go back as far as we can. And we just talk really, really, not necessarily concretely, because I think it's hard, but you talk about possible motivations, or you talk about perspectives, and the impetus for countries to do things in the international community that are never, let's be perfectly honest, altruistic.
Sure, right.
Never. Yeah. So let's say that first and foremost. How about we say that out loud? You know what I'm saying? How about we say it out loud, that the first and most important thing, now again, the Republicans say it out loud, but when they say it, it makes me want to... They say it with pride. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They say it with pride rather than, listen, it's an unfortunate necessity, but let's not deny the reality of it, because I think that's incredible.
I mean, we never, as regular everyday people, know the machinations behind what the government does.
You'll never.
In terms of moving machinery and the war machines all over,
Right.
That's like, I've given up, you know what I mean? But I think that, like, even in the case of Afghanistan, I mean, hello, the heroin route is like, that's why we kept ourselves over there.
And everybody forgets.
And
you have a guy.
And opiates are the reason why killing 1 + 1 = hello.
And you have, I remember when 9/11 happened, and you had, now Bill Maher's really taken a turn lately, but you had a guy like Bill Maher get up on Politically Incorrect and literally quite quickly after 9/11 say, maybe we'll stop sticking our nose in other people's business. He was in no way, shape, or form justifying what happened or saying it was okay. He was making a causal connection between foreign policy in the United States and the way we played it out, or the way the United States played it out in Afghanistan. And then when they pulled it all and watched the slaughter happen, we're wondering why somehow people would want revenge later. And then his show was off the air.
Right, yeah.
He was done.
I mean, we could go on for days talking about how Saudi Arabia is really by far our biggest enemy, but we're paying the man. It's like paying the man. It's like the Saudi Arabians are the equivalent of white citizens in the United States. You know what I mean?
We need to decide, and we have already decided, I say this facetiously, what's more important. And I understand everybody's going to be like, you're such an idealist, but we can run a society one of two ways. We can run a society with economic interests as our driving force, or we can run a society with human rights and respect as our driving force. Now, that, to me, that's what differentiates the right and the left. And the right will say, Joanna, you can't pay for your human rights without money. And the left will say, yeah, but when you're focused on money, you're never going to have actual human rights. So pick a road. And if you're saying it's the former, if you're saying it's money, then you picked your road, that's fine. But don't lie and don't mislead people into convincing them that this windfall of money will have some sort of Reaganomic trickle-down effect. It won't, it hasn't, it's been proven lacking.
I mean, I am so over the whole idea of like money and I've never been good at money and, in defiance of my religion, but
breaking stereotype,
are
left, right,
forever printing more money. Like, print more money, just print more money and shut up. You know what I mean? Like,
the money thing is frustrating for sure.
So full of shit. It's unbelievable. And it becomes a political football. And I'm not a good football player either. It's just like, I can't. So rather than try to make sense of that, I bring everything back to what can one person do to help one other person. And when I saw it, which made me think, and which is why we're on this, because when I saw you teaching, because I mean, I don't think you're Jewish. You know
I'm not Jewish, no. I'm not,
but,
to be honest, I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form.
But I just think that that's such an amazing thing because there's such a big conversation about Holocaust education going on in America at the same time of teaching about Martin Luther King and, like what America and history is becoming like history, you know what I mean? And I felt like, and I've always, since the day I first saw you and started following you, and when I found out you were a teacher, I was always just like, so wish that more of the teachers would be like you and funny and engaging, and then you're teaching something that here in America, I'm like sinking into this whole Holocaust thing as a result of this project. So I just went to like this conference in Miami, the Association of Holocaust Organizations. I was like, Holocaust galore, you know what I mean? But it was really
an odd descriptor. Holocaust galore.
It's like, there's a song that I want to do one day when I do the movie, the remake of The Producers, the making of a Holocaust film. And there's no business like show up business, you know what I mean? Anyway, but the whole conversation was about how do we teach Holocaust now in this climate. And this wonderful woman, she's like 89 years old. She's a survivor. She's the head of Holocaust education for the whole city of Miami. 450 teachers is who she's connecting with to teach them. And she just said it's becoming so difficult because the reading material now that is being limited by Ron DeSantis, you know what I mean? Like, they don't even want to teach mouse. I mean, these are like basic.
I did a TikTok about that. I did the TikTok, and within 24 hours of doing that TikTok, it did so well. They said Amazon was sold out because people were just buying it. I'm like, fine, they're not going to do it. That's fine. Read it to your kid. You know what I mean? Like, and to answer your first question, I think the way that we get at anything is people. It has to be people. It has to be. There has to be integration of culture and conversation, and there has to be bridges built so that kids can sit down and listen to that probably amazing 89-year-old woman tell her story. Because I promise you, I don't care who you are, what family you grew up in, what maybe bigotry that was shoved into your head, you sit down with that 89-year-old woman and you're not walking out the same. It might not be perfect. You're not going to win everybody over, but I promise you that it's being in the room changes everything.
Right.
And I think that's what I try to do with art. That's what I try to do with my school. We try to make sure the school itself is diverse. So my school used to be Judeo-Christian, 75%, let's say Jewish. And over time it's changed, and schools, private schools changed. And now it's incredibly diverse, religiously, ethnically, socioeconomically. And the beauty of that is that I can't just stand at the front of the room and talk about diversity. I can. It's not incredibly effective. But if I can stand in the front of the room and talk about it, and then have a student who has lived in Ethiopia, Hong Kong, and has now moved to Toronto, and her family's originally from Bangladesh, what?
Yeah.
There's the education. That's it.
No, it's
Because
all
then
about storytelling.
you hear it.
Yeah.
That's it. It is people. And the problem going on in the United States right now, and the problem in Canada too, maybe not so much in Toronto, is the segregation. And I don't just mean this, you're standing on, whoever side of the political aisle. I mean actual segregation. I mean governmental policies that put African Americans over here, white people over here, and we wonder why can we not figure it out? Well, I'll tell you why. Because you had slavery, and then for generations, you weren't allowed to eat at the same restaurant counter. That separation is the damage. Yeah. That physical divide, because now your kids don't go to the same school. They don't play in the same baseball league. They don't, right? And it's that physical divide that doesn't get solved necessarily with busing and all of that kind of stuff. But it's that physical divide that allows prejudice and stereotype and all of our preconceptions to run our mind.
Right. Yeah,
that's it.
One of the things that was at this conference was this guy who had been to Sarajevo, and that Sarajevo was that they had that culture war going on there.
Yeah.
That when the war was over, the kids went to school and they would separate the kids in the building and teach them the different histories of that culture. So I said to him after the talk, I said, well, that's like the Jets and the Sharks from West Side Story, He goes, yeah, but these kids went out of their way to kind of want to be together and share stories. It was like they defied that separation.
Mm-hmm.
And that was interesting because I just never thought that would be something that you would even hear being done. And it would
absolutely.
And I think if it wasn't for social media being able to be the easiest bridge for storytelling, that seems to be the one good thing that I can say comes out of social media, is that we do hear so many stories. This platform, unlike the others, is we hear an immediate 1-minute version of a moment of a day, of a disrespect or whatever. And I think that's what's probably the best thing of this project, of this app, is that we get stories galore.
I think that's and I don't know, but I mean, I started TikTok when COVID happened, so no idea. Like I had no idea what it was or what it could be. And once I've seen it, it's not without its issues, but once I've seen a side of TikTok that is so incredibly educationally driven and powerful and amazing, I say to the kids, including Instagram and Twitter, not so much Instagram, but you're going to be able to wield these tools in order to build amazing things, or you can just watch the dancing. Like, you have the choice. That's the thing. The medium is at your own, is really at your own behest. Like, you have the power to do that. You have the power to go down those roads.
Right.
And I know that people will say, well, the algorithm, Joe, it tries to get kids. And sure, it does, but stop calling kids idiots, because I'm telling you right now, my students are 10 times more educated, aware, impressive than a lot of my 40-year-old friends, who are very much caught in the, what kind of car should I drive? What should my hair be like? What should...
Right. Yeah.
The kids got it. We should get the hell out of their way is what we should do, because they're the ones that are like, because I just, they don't understand. They don't understand the hate and the animosity. I start everything. We talk obviously a lot in Canada about our Indigenous horrific past. And the kids will flat out say, but Joanna, why would you hate somebody? Why would you want to limit or control or destroy something that didn't have anything negative? And I never answer that question. I let them answer it because they'll get to it in a second. Because they'll have the same question, or we'll get to the end of the 12 world religions that we study, and we always talk about it in context, and we're always talking about different issues that are going on in the world. And we'll get to the end of the 12, and consistently after teaching that course, they will say, it's like you taught me the same religion 12 different ways. I said, isn't it? If you get to the bare bones of it,
Right.
Not the day we take off or the food we eat or don't eat, you get to the bare bones of it. It is the most important lessons, whether you're religious or not, are consistent, are really consistent. I had a student one time, a Jewish student, and man, he fought with me every day. Every day was a discussion and a debate and a whatever. He's a very smart kid. And one day he said to me very calmly, he said, we were talking about how people believe in God. And this kid puts up his hand. He goes, I don't believe in God. I said, oh, okay. He's like, but I'm Jewish, but I don't believe in God. And I went, what? And he said, I'll never forget it because it was so powerful. He said, listen, 1/3, 33% of my ancestors in some way or shape or form were ripped from this earth. I will never turn my back on that culture, on that heritage, on those people. I will stand up for them and I will stand as them. I don't care about the afterlife. I don't talk about it. I don't pray. I don't do any of that. But if I don't stand with them, they will cease to exist. The other 2/3 will cease to exist. So no, I don't believe in God, but I will always be Jewish. He even said, I will always make sure I donate, what is it, 10%? Whatever the expected percentage is to my synagogue. Absolutely, I will. And I was blown away by that awareness coming from a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, that's true.
He wasn't talking about, hating other religions. He wasn't talking about any sort of, he was just saying very, very simply, if we don't stand up for what was and what is important and the people and their choices, I'm not doing anything important here.
Right.
And then I started thinking, because we were talking a lot about, let's say, governmental legislation and sort of the Christian underpinnings of the United States and of Canada. And we came to the conclusion that when we talk about having religious freedom, you have to have freedom of and freedom from. And I said those words and I'm just like, I've never articulated it that way, meaning you can't have religious freedom if the only thing they say to you is go on, practice whatever religion you want, but you're going to get 2 weeks off at Christmas. These are going to be your days off. The store schedule is going to change on Sunday. It's going to say God in the national anthem. It's going to, all of these subtle and not so subtle messaging systems coming from government. You don't have freedom from. You have freedom of, but not freedom from. And I think that's true on a whole host of issues, right? In this country, because Canada, the United States, we spend so much time saying you get to do anything you want to do in a free society, but we don't stop to indoctrinate, to tell you pieces of who you're supposed to be, and then tell you can have your freedom.
Right.
And I think it's the fundamental sort of building block when people talk about things like free speech, which I struggle with, because
I think
I struggle.
Overrated. I don't know.
I struggle, right? You say that free speech is supposed to be in a democratic society, your ability to say anything you want, and then stand next to the person that says everything you detest, but let him speak anyways. And I struggle with that. I do. And I struggle with people saying that violence is only violence when something physical is done, because then my mind goes exactly to where we were, 1933, and say, yeah, but when you don't stop cartoons being created and propaganda being created and changing history books and manipulating truth and fact and having speeches where you lie and you create people to blame for things that with manipulative, manipulative language. When you do that, you set the stage for that powder keg. You light the fuse. And I have a really hard time trying to divide those two. We say you're not allowed to threaten. That's not freedom of speech, right? I can't say I'm going to punch you, right? That's a threat. That's a criminal act. But me holding up a Nazi symbol, how is that any less of a threat than me saying I'm going to punch you? Isn't that just different language?
No, I agree. Look, and that's why the whole project of Won't Be Silent is because if silence is complicit, and it's as dangerous as the violence in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more people that stay silent, the easier it is for the one or two people that are being aggressive and monsters will end up, controlling the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how
Absolutely.
come Hitler came to power. He controlled the narrative, and he convinced enough people over the course of 10 years to say, I'm right. You know what I mean? It's simple. He's human. He's had you know what I mean? It's kind of like his moment was at the right time, at the right moment, the right
Absolutely. All the right pieces came to, and the guy unfortunately was one hell of a speaker. And you think about how he controlled the media and how he controlled knowledge and that's why burning books just makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Number one, I laugh every time a school board in Florida bans a book, because I'm like, you just made 50 of your kids go buy that book. Are you trying to increase literacy? Because that's what they just did. You said, oh my God, this one has some dodgy stuff in it. Half the school just went and bought it on Amazon, you morons. But so we don't live in that era anymore, right? We don't live in an era, and heaven help me, how much we lost with all of what he destroyed. The books, the research, the science, the math, the art. How much did we lose when we did that, when we allowed that to happen?
Tons. Medical breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs.
Gone,
I
right?
mean, Albert Einstein happens to get out in time. Could you imagine?
Well, and the only reason and the only reason those men were protected, why? They had a skill set that we could use. Right? Which also breaks my heart. I think, holy crap. And that's how we went about picking and choosing who we were going to rescue and save and liberate.
How about all the Nazis that came to America, smuggled in to be part of NASA and whatever?
If you were smart, if you had something to offer, that's what happens when we put money ahead of that, right? When we put money ahead of doing what is right. And I think it's such a, I don't think I'm being naive when I say, because I really truly believe this, that there are a vast greater number of good, amazing, loving, powerful people on this planet, I don't care what country you come from, than there are the opposite. But what the
100%.
opposite will rely on is people being afraid and desperate. And afraid and desperate, trumps, I can never use that expression ever again, by the way. Afraid and desperate trumps intellect and compassion every single time. Every single time.
Yes. And then there's also the phenomenon of the broken human spirit that would allow themselves to act against their better judgment.
Yeah.
Because if you look at all the Germans that participated, look at what the SS meant. And I don't want to go on to this too long, even though, but nobody ever talks about this. These people would like throw a baby in the air, shoot them, right? And then go to have dinner at home and pet their dog and have Christmas trees. And that was their like day job. And if you think these were loving people to their kids, this is everything that you're saying. These were musically inclined, cultural, and yet out of the fear of not being part of them, they let themselves do the unthinkable.
But it wasn't just, I don't even think it was just fear. I think, and I taught a course in genocide once. It was, I don't recommend it. It was a hard, it was a hard lesson.
No.
We went from sort of the first known documented genocide all the way through. And what you see first and foremost is always, whatever power that exists, they have to figure out how to dehumanize, devalue, how to make that group, whoever that group is in their particular culture or time, to make that group seem non-human, demonic, evil, lesser than, right? Because if I can do that, if I can manipulate, which is why violent words matter. Because if you can convince a whole bunch of people that killing those people is a, heaven forbid, a biblical whatever, or is a national necessity because of what they did to your people
AKA
generations
a
before,
good thing. Yeah,
right?
yes.
You're going to save everybody else. That's the first thing they ever do. And that is, they do it exactly the same way. They called the Jewish people rats, and they made videos and cartoons and propaganda films. They called the Tutsi cockroaches in Rwanda. They did it time and time again in every single place. And they did it through the media, and they did it through manipulation, and they did it through words. And that's why when I get so angry when I hear people saying words aren't violent, you're not paying attention then. You're not paying attention. You can say we need to deal with it differently, but how dare you say they're not violent? They are the foundation of the violence that is to come.
Where it
Without
starts.
those words,
It starts from words.
they don't shoot the bait. They can't. Psychopaths can, but they don't.
Yeah, but
right?
again, I'm on the same page as you. The First Amendment needs tweaking. I don't know, or it needs like secondary, like specific guidelines to what is okay. Like it's
Right.
just saying fire in a movie theater is not free speech. You know,
Everybody says,
I
listen,
can
I
think
can't
of
threaten
10
to punch
things
you.
that should be in that list.
I can't threaten to punch you. And by the way, when a threat is about, from what I understand, it might be different in the States because your criminal law differs state to state, whereas ours is national. But a threat in Canada is a perceived threat. So if I perceive your words or your actions being threatening, that's all I need to prove. I need to prove I thought there was a credible threat. So in that situation, you joke around with your kids all the time or your friends, and you go, right? That's a threat. But was it perceived to be violent? Did you really think I was going to follow through with it? And all of that is incredibly subjective. Right. I am so exhausted of people thinking or saying that we live in an objective truth reality. What? In what universe is there an objective truth? It is all perception. You and I will walk away from this conversation having two different memories of this conversation. They're not wrong. They're just not objectively true. Right? I'll bring my bias. You'll bring yours. I'll bring, I was focused on my hair in this particular, whatever. You bring whatever to the table, and then you walk away with that. And it makes me nervous when anybody says okay, but there's objective truths and not. And then my mind goes to the whole trans fight right now, talking about what is, Matt Walsh, what is a woman? He's doing it to dehumanize.
Yeah, of course.
By essence of those words, he is dehumanizing. He is making lesser than. And that's his goal.
But I have to say, women's movement needs to snap into the next phase.
Are you crazy? Of course we do.
I mean, how I don't understand how women, gays, Jews, Asian American, Latin, indigenous
We're all not equally pissed.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. It's a perfect answer, actually, because each one of those communities were manipulated and used at different times to get different things. And whatever power they've managed to attain, women specifically, is at the behest of the patriarchy and the cultural elite that has granted it to them. So women, especially white women, are very unlikely to bite the hand that fed them because they're sitting in a okay spot, right? And so what do? Well, I'll tell you what we don't do. We don't elect Hillary Clinton. The number one reason you guys had to suffer 4 years of insanity and watch this all blow up is because women in the United States sat at home and talked about the pantsuit she wore and how they didn't like it. And how dare she stay with Bill Clinton after he cheated on her? I'm not voting for her. That's what happened down there. That's women. We did that. What's going on in Missouri about the dress code? That's a woman. That's a woman talking about another woman. How dare you show your arms? Are we insane? And again, it's all about a power struggle, right? I think very carefully actually about our Indigenous community in Canada and how these beautiful friggin' culture has been decimated. And one of the ways it's been decimated is the government throws a bunch of money in the middle of the group and says, just distribute it how you see fit. Watch them fight. Watch them protect their own families. Watch them protect their own friends. Of course they're going to. That is, it's not human nature necessarily, but it is the way you divide and conquer. Because if they're more angry with each other.
And it's the culture of money.
There we go.
Down to that whole thing about, money's, Anyway, all I know is that people like you are great storytellers, and those students of yours are lucky to be able to have at an impressionable age, someone that can kind of be an amazing kind of voice of reason, and the fact that you do this multicultural kind of art in specific, because art, music, film, that is the only way to teach the next few generations. And the other thing about Holocaust specific education, for me, I think showing the bones and the shoes needs to be put aside for a while. Because I don't think that's a way to engage. It's kind of like it starts off with the negative. You just have to know that it happened. If knowing that it happened isn't enough for you, then maybe you're not going to go. You can't get everybody to do everything you want.
Right.
But I know that music and art. That's why I felt so compelled to talk to you about that. And I did love that coffee scene. Anyway.
I wish I could have shown more of it because it was almost a disaster. I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, well, everything that's a disaster turns out to be the way it's supposed to be. But I just think that, it's a pleasure to have a longer conversation with you. I mean, I knew that this would be the way the conversation would go. Like, it's educational, it's informative.
Right.
I do want you to make sure you write down Voyage of the Damned.
Oh yeah, definitely gonna watch that for sure.
And I mean, I think you're awesome, and I think what you're doing is great, and
thank you.
it's just, pleasure to have this moment.
I think the key is with art, it's like when they're in, even if they're not art, all the kids are like, I'm not an artist, I'm not an artist. But when you're engaged in something artistic, you trigger something else in your brain, in my opinion, that triggers a level of empathy that words never can.
Right.
And it sort of sinks in there. So when the kids were reading these stories, or they were talking about what images to include, or what to draw and how to do it and stuff like that, when you're engaging different parts of your brain, you're able to open your mind to different avenues of thought. And I think that's what's hard about education, right? We're so prone to sit kids down and say, read this, do these dates, do these. And as an older teacher, I've really steered away from it. Not that they don't need to learn how to memorize, and because I know what education expects, but not always, not always. And what's going to change their outlook and the way that they research and the way that they have conversations is those quiet moments when they kind of come to a realization, when they kind of come to a, like, I remember a moment where they looked at all these pictures all over the world, all of the pictures of the memorials. And one of the girls, her eyes were just like a little teary. And she's like, all of this, it's beautiful, but it's so horrifically sad that it takes something like this to understand how connected we all are. And if we get to understand that connection, and I think that's what social media does, actually. It's a beautiful way to connect.
It's a beautiful opportunity. The one thing I'm going to also send you, I have like a 2.5-minute video. I had a youth choir sing the song that is about the film.
Right.
And rather than just sit there and listen to them sing it, they were like 12, 13, and 14 years old. And their response to it was so amazing. And I think you'll like that, because they're teenagers.
Yeah, I would love to.
There's one little gay Jewish boy was like just so heartbreakingly connected to speaking up because he's told not to. You know what I mean? I'm going to send that to you. I think you'll like it.
I think that's where it all starts, right? When people say, what do we do? And I tend to think a little bigger, sometimes I think just me in a classroom with a room full of people, that's what I need. But then I think bigger, and I truly believe that we need, in Canada and in the United States, a national education platform that is funded irrespective of political party, that is run by educators who have been trained, psychologists who have been trained, experts in their field who have been trained, that decide on the curriculum. And no matter who gets in power, they don't get to regulate that. They don't get to pull out Holocaust stuff because, oh, well, we don't want to talk about that anymore. They don't get to pull out gay rights activist stuff. They don't get to say whose pronoun we're going to use that day. Politicizing that and removing it, to me, is no different than 1933. None.
I agree. I've been screaming we're back in the early 30s.
Yeah.
For years, to anyone who would listen.
Yeah. And it's not happening everywhere. And don't get me wrong, I talk a lot about Ron DeSantis in Florida, obviously, and I speak to a lot of Floridians. They're like, Joanna, we're not like that. We're not. And I get it. And it's probably best I didn't have all the money in the world, because I swear to God, I would have already set up in a Walmart parking lot in Florida. And I would have had an RV and I swear to God, if I had any kind of money, I'd be just like, you know what? This is what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to teach. And I promise you, more kids will remember, and adults for that matter, that lecture, even if they don't agree with it. Right? I'm very much drawn to sitting down in rooms with you can't sit in a room with somebody who is just filled with hate, but you can sit in a room with somebody who is ignorant and even spouting things I don't agree with. I'll sit in that room. I'll go to any state, anytime, anywhere, and sit in the room with people that don't agree with me, and sit in the room with people who want to argue about gender, who want to argue about what should be in history or whatever. I'll sit in that room. Because I think that's all they might not be all they need, but it's all some people need.
Right.
Right. But I won't exclude them.
It's all about storytelling and being willing to tell it, and what you would do is you would sit in a room and you would tell them something that they needed to hear.
That's it. And connect with people, right? Like, I constantly try to figure out ways, I hear all of the podcasts that are popular, and you look at the Shapiros and the Walshes and, well, no longer Andrew Tate, and all of these individuals, Jordan Peterson. And I think we need something opposite to that. But the funny part is the clickbait that people who hate, who just, it's so simple to them. It's so simple. It's so black and white. That's why they can make a 30-second video that grabs your attention and you watch and you're like, oh, I agree with that. Because they've made it simple. As soon as somebody makes humanity simple, I promise you they're lying. Right. Nothing is simple. Nothing is one-sided. Nothing is so clear-cut that I can make a 30-second video on women's rights and be done with it, or a 30-second video on what we should do when it comes to trans youth and be done with it. Nothing is crystal clear.
No, but you can make this 30-second spot of making somebody other seem like...
Oh, yeah, you can.
Bam, honey, you get...
quick.
I mean, yeah. I want to be like the answer. Quick. I'd like to be the opposite answer to that clickbait thing, but I don't have it in me to hate that much. I mean, and I hate plenty.
But it's a great...
I mean?
But here's the problem. You can't have an intelligent answer to clickbait. It's not even about hate. You can't... You have to forego intelligence, My girlfriend was talking about this one time because she's like, the conservatives just sell lower taxes, Joe. They just sell lower taxes, and it makes people want to vote for them. And I'm like, yeah, but here are the implications. And she's like, well, you need to make that TikTok. I said, yes, but that TikTok's about an hour and a half. She goes, no, nobody's listening an hour and a half. I go, there's the problem. Yeah. We all want to believe that the world can be perfect. We can pay next to no taxes and everything's going to be shiny and new. That's our own chosen ignorance, right? But I don't know how to make the opposite quick TikTok in order to combat. You don't have to pay any more income tax. Yay. How do I oppose that? Do I say, you're going to have to pay a boat ton of income tax?
No, you say income tax is fabulous. No,
I'm not going to win them over with that, right?
No one's buying now. Everyone's
that's what I'm saying.
Blocking her.
Right. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it all has to be, carefully laid out. And it's been sort of the bane of my existence for the last little while, ever since she pointed that out.
You tell good stories the way you tell your stories in a minute, or you know what I mean?
I hope so.
Don't underestimate.
Big issues are hard.
Don't underestimate your ability to communicate a message, my darling.
Every once in a while I get a hun in there, and that's about all I need.
Anyway, this was great. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Send me a picture of the artwork if you have. Let me see if I can. I'm not the most prolific editor, but I'll see if I could throw it in there at some point.
Yeah, you want a picture or a video?
Yeah, probably a video. I can take a still from the video.
But well, sure, I'll do both. I'll take a couple of cool stills, and I'll just take a video of a little bit closer of a pan.
So it spans, yeah.
So you can see it a little bit more up close. I'll do both.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon.
Definitely. Take care.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.
First of all, I had a student who's an amazing artist who took images from Holocaust survivors and actually sketched them right onto the canvas, and we included their names, and beside the piece we'll include a biography of each of the sketches so we know who they were and are and where they went. This particular one's is so incredible. This was a grandmother of one of the students I teach here, and she was only 4 years old when she was on this boat. This is actually your documentation that they gave us a copy of so we could include it on the piece. I mean, and when we found this out, we were just all so incredibly moved, and like the importance of the piece got that much bigger, knowing that on the ship contained a person that started an entire family that happened to be rescued, but obviously not by Canada, the United States. The water of the piece is comprised of hundreds of different images of Holocaust museums across the world. So not just across the different countries, but not just across Canada, the United States, but across the world in its entirety. What they've done to commemorate, what they've done to educate. So we thought that was important. We talked about each image as it went up. The hull of the ship is actually comprised of journals that were actually written during the Holocaust by survivors, none of which is obviously in English, but we wanted to write it in their handwriting, so we copied it, projected it, and then traced it, so it was actually their handwriting that was on the ship. We also are going to translate some passages so people can read it as they're looking at the piece of art. And then in the body of the ship, you can see dates, and all of these dates and or numbers correspond to just pieces of the history that tie what went on, how many people were affected, what happened on each date, the way that history moved through time and affected this piece. And this right here, that's Lisa Abdon's signature, who is, who lived to be 84, and that was our student's grandma. So we wanted to make sure that that was included in the piece as well.